Good day. Nice to see you in this morning. You and your team. Blair Kennedy, Executive Director, Government Accounting Policy and Reporting. John Daly, Senior Director, Public Accounts and Advisory Services. I've just got a couple of comments before I hear your points of order, points of protest on Public Accounts 2024. These documents were tabled yesterday, the very last day Parliament was sitting. As long as I have been chair, this committee, in report after report, has been urging and calling on these documents to be tabled by the end of September. They're typically tabled the end of sometime in October or early November. And this support, or this call, has had cross-party support. Now, I'm going to let members, of course, probe our witnesses today as to why they've come so late. But if you're protesting us sitting after yesterday, I'd urge you to direct your questions to Cabinet Ministers for not managing this document so it is presented to Parliament in a timely manner to ensure that members and the public have the accountability and transparency they deserve. On that note, I'm going to turn things over to our witnesses, who will each be given time to speak if they choose to take it. So, Ms. Hogan, you have the floor for up to... Yes, point of order.
Mr. Chair, I just, again, I respect you may complain about the tardiness of the tabling of public accounts. They were done according to standing orders. But my issue is not with the witnesses being here, but out of respect for the witnesses that are here, you've called this meeting last minute with less than 24-hour notice. You and I have had these discussions before. It's irrespectable of us. It's a disrespect to our committee. And the fact that the tabling of the documents happened yesterday, I'm questioning, we have to allow members to prepare themselves in order to ask the right questions. And here we are again, at your will. You didn't consult anyone. I didn't receive any emails from you. So I would ask, why do you not consult with committee? Why do you not respect the will of committee? When committee meetings are called, you've essentially, and it's an important exercise, I understand, but be respectful of members. You are not respectful of members, and I'm losing confidence in you, Chair, because in 10 years, never gone through this before. Only 2 meetings I've had in less than 24-hour notice. One was in October when you called you put a notice of meeting with less than 1 hour, and then you've put a notice of meeting with less than 24 hours. It's disrespectful to the Chair, and to us as a committee, as committee members. That's not how we operate. I've been with Mr. McCauley on government operations with an opposition chair. Never had the chair done that. It's disrespectful to our time. And I don't mind doing this exercise, but give us at least 48 hours. We require notice of motions, a 48-hour notice of motion to be tabled 48 hours.
Thank you.
So well, it's not going to go well today. I'm warning you, it's not going to go well today because you're disrespectful to us.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin. Ms. Rempell Gardner.
I would just say that this was getting into the realm of debate. Yes. On a point of order. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Drouin, I was not able to provide 48 hours notice because it was not known if the public accounts were going to be tabled yesterday. So as soon as I knew, we invited we confirmed with the departments, and they were all willing to be here. And I don't think it's asking too much for members of Parliament of this committee to be here as well, if officials can be here to speak to this document.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
I actually would like to seek some clarification from the clerk. I want to know when invitations were sent out to our officials, because if we only received such short notice, I would like to know how short notice did they receive in order to be here for you to get the resources of the room. I have had this conversation with all of our committee time and time again for the amount of time that I've been on this committee. And every single time you give us the runaround, you quite frankly are quite tyrannical in how you operate this committee. And it is
really
order,
Chair.
unfair.
Okay. No, I'm going to go to our witnesses very soon.
I'm still not finished. I'm seeking clarification. When exactly were invitations to officials sent out? Were they also less than 24 hours?
Debate,
because that was the notice that we received. I have no problems. I have no problem being in this committee. I have no problem doing the work of this committee. And I have shown that, I've proven that in many ways by building consensus amongst all parties to try to pass forward motions to get the work done. The reality is, Mr. Chair, in the time that I've been on this committee, we have had more meetings and less reports than ever within public accounts. And that's a failure on your part, Chair. I really wish that we would stop playing this partisan politics, and I would like some answers here. So please, I would love the clerk to help us clarify when were invitations to officials sent out.
Well, I asked the clerk to put the officials on notice on Monday that if the public accounts come, we would look to bring them in on Wednesday. Once we had indication that they were available and confirmation began to come in, you saw the first notice. We had, I think, two departments on it with a TBC, and that was filled out in the morning. There's no skullduggery here. If the government had done its job and tabled these in a timely manner, we would have dealt with this in a timely manner. I am put in this corner because of the actions of the government and the delay in this.
Absolutely not.
Mr. Drouin, it's not my job to march to the government's beat.
It's not the government's beat, it's members' beat.
Right,
you're disrespectful.
I think
you're disrespectful.
Mr. Drouin, it's not my intent to be disrespectful.
If you advise you advise department officials on Monday, we found out at 4:30 yesterday. That is disrespectful to members.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin.
Franchement.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin, for your points of order. Ms. Hogan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our audit of the Government of Canada's consolidated financial statements for the 2023-24 fiscal year. I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. With me today are Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, and Sana Garda and Etienne Matt, who are financial audit principals. Our audit of the government's financial statements is the largest of the audits carried out by my office. It involves almost every one of our financial auditors working to ensure that the data presented in the statements is complete and accurately reflects the government's financial results for the year. This work serves to help Parliament exercise its oversight of the government, promotes transparency and accountability, and encourages good financial management. You will find our independent auditor's report on the government's consolidated financial statements starting at page 55 of Volume 1 of the Public Accounts of Canada 2024. We issued an unmodified or clean audit opinion on the government's consolidated financial statements. A clean opinion means that the information in the financial statements was presented fairly and in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. In other words, readers can rely on the information provided in the financial statements. In 2023, our auditor's report was dated September 7th, and the public accounts were tabled on October 24th. This year, the government took longer to finalize the consolidated financial statements, which caused delays in completing our audit. The tabling of the Public Accounts of Canada happened yesterday. The public accounts are a key accountability document. They help Canadians and parliamentarians understand how public funds were spent compared to the commitments and promises that the government made in the year's budget.
When this information is not available in a timely way, its usefulness and relevance is compromised, and the opportunity for Parliament to use this information for decision-making is also reduced. Each year, my office also provides Parliament with a commentary that highlights important information about the results of all of our federal financial audits. This year, we are drawing attention to opportunities for improvement that we noted in the financial reporting process. The Office of the Comptroller General leads and oversees financial accounting and reporting across the federal government. Based on the results of our work, greater oversight is needed from that office for significant transactions and new programs across the government. This year's commentary highlights a weakness that we have covered in past reports. 80% of Crown corporations did not have their corporate plans approved before the start of their fiscal year. Delays in approving these plans must be addressed because they result in operational inefficiencies, project delays, or additional costs. We also raise observations about pay administration, deficiencies in the IT general controls over some key government systems, the accounting for asset retirement obligations, and national defense's inventory. These are recurring issues that my office continues to monitor. Mr. Chair, I would like to thank the dedicated staff across the many departments, agencies, and Crown corporations involved in preparing the government's financial statements. This concludes my opening remarks. We will be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Et on vous remercie.
Thank you. So we'll now go to Ms. Boudreau for 5 minutes.
For the opportunity to appear before the committee today. I'm pleased to be joined by officials from my department, Blair Kennedy, Executive Director, John Daly, Senior Director. As committee members are aware, the production of the public accounts of Canada is set out in the Financial Administration Act. Deputy heads and chief financial officer of organizations are responsible for the accuracy of the information provided and are required to follow the Government of Canada accounting policies, which are based upon public sector accounting standards. The production and finalization of the public accounts is a joint responsibility between the Receiver General for Canada, the Department of Finance, and the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, which include the Office of the Comptroller. As Comptroller, one of my responsibilities is providing leadership for financial management within the Government of Canada. My office provides government-wide leadership on accounting standards and preparation of departmental financial statements, including the preparation of the public accounts of Canada. Le ministère des Finances est responsable.
The Department of Finance is responsible for the comments and the analysis of the financial statement, which shows the current state compared to the budget. The Comptroller General compiles information from departments, organisms, and Crown corporations and publishes public accounts. And the AG's office works on the consolidated financial statements, which are included in public accounts. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to say that for the 26th year in a row, we issued a non-modified or a clean opinion from the AG's office. Mr. Chair, I'd like to also underline that this shows the high quality of the financial reporting in Canada and the work done by my civil service colleagues. I'd like to thank the financial management community of the Government of Canada, Department of Finance, the Comptroller General, and the Office of the Auditor General for their assistance in preparing public accounts.
Touch on the timing of this year's public accounts, which I know has been of interest of this committee. The government is legally required to table the public accounts no later than December 31st, following the end of the fiscal year, or within the first 15 days once the House reconvenes if it is not sitting during that period. And I want to assure the committee that we always endeavor to table the public accounts at the earliest opportunity. There were several significant transactions and new transactions that there were several significant and new transactions that were accounted for as part of the preparation of the 23-24 consolidated financial statements. My team and I needed to take adequate time to ensure that the results presented were fair and credible and were in accordance with public sector accounting standards. Some of these transactions included Indigenous contingent liabilities and provisions for accounts receivable and loans, in particular, COVID-19 programs and the Canada student loans. The government also had to assess whether any important events happened between the financial statement date and the finalization of the public accounts. Plus précisément, il a dû déterminer si certains événements.
More specifically, we had to see if these certain incidents had to be accounted for or explained in the notes. One of the examples that required additional information was the recent confirmation of the non-authorized surplus of $1.9 billion in the Civil Service Retirement Fund. So we had to carry out additional work and analyses to complete public accounts this year, which explains the late date of its of the date we were able to share it. So, Mr. Chair, we remain engaged towards publishing the next public accounts by October 15, 2024, barring any exceptional incidents. I'd like to thank the committee for the interest and the time that they have given us as the Comptroller General of Canada. I have the honor and the privilege of being here today to talk about the Public Accounts of Canada 2024. My colleagues will also be happy to answer your questions. Thank you. And we'd like to thank you for being with us today.
Our first round will consist of 4 minutes, 6 minutes each. Mr. McCauley, you have the floor, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for being with us, as always, witnesses. Mr. Forbes, the Globe and Mail reported former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, your former boss, on Friday received the news that she was to be fired from her position, and yet was still to come out to deliver the fall economic statement showing the $61 billion deficit, basically taking the fall for blowing past the $40 billion line in the sand. Were you tasked with preparing a transition binder for Mark Carney or any other incoming new finance ministers?
I did not prepare any transition material for any new minister until one was announced on Monday.
So when did you start preparing a transition binder?
We started preparing a transition binder on Monday.
Monday
transition
morning?
material when a new minister, when Minister LeBlanc was confirmed.
So after Minister LeBlanc, not before?
We had material. We always have material, evergreen material, ready for a change of ministers or deputies.
Have you met professionally with Mr. Carney?
Have I worked professionally with Mr. Carney?
No, met professionally in this current role.
No, I've not.
No. Do you meet with him at all personally?
I have not spoken to Mr. Carney. I spoke to him once when I was the Deputy Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada briefly. We exchanged emails, and that was the last time I've interacted with him.
There's been a widely reported conflict between finance and PMO over spending. What financial measures that finance deemed inflationary that ended up being included in the fall economic statement? So issues that finance pushed back against but still ended up in the fall economic statement.
Thanks for the question. We provide advice to the Minister of Finance on budget and fiscal matters. The Minister and then the government makes decisions on what measures to implement, what advice to follow, and we then implement. And so, I mean, that's all I can say about what decisions the government's taken.
The fired former finance minister commented on costly political gimmicks that the government can ill afford. What costly political gimmicks were included in the fall economic statement?
I think you'd have to, I didn't write that letter that you're referring to. I think you probably have to ask Chrystia Freeland, the former Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister, about
anything in the
that.
fall economic statement that you as Deputy Minister of Finance advised against?
Thanks for the question. I won't talk about the advice we provided versus the decisions the government took. The government gets to decide, and we implement the decisions the government takes based on our advice and their decisions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Boudreau, I have to join my colleague, the Chair, in expressing disappointment at the late publication of the public accounts. This committee 2 years ago in its public accounts report recommended October 15th. Your predecessor, I understand, committed to that date, and yet here we have, I think it's the latest tabling ever of the public accounts. It almost looks like it was done to cover up the fact that we ended up with a $61 billion deficit last fiscal year, again blowing past the line in the sand drawn by the previous finance minister. Was there any political pressure to delay this, the public accounts?
It's not. Oh, okay. And my predecessor, you're right, my predecessor.
I'm asking specifically, was there any
and the
instruction?
answer is no.
Okay. So it just happened organically?
Like I was saying, there were a lot of big transactions this year. But I also want
would you provide in writing those transactions, please?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned one of them was the pension, and help me out here. The pension, the surplus, that was realized in the current fiscal year, not the previous fiscal year. So why did you mention that as one of the items that caused the delay, the consideration of that?
So it is one of the subsequent events that we had to look at.
Right, but help me out under the PSAB, the rules, it would be recognized in the fiscal year that it occurred in, which is the current fiscal year, not the previous fiscal year. So help me out, why did that cause a delay on the previous year's books?
If the events existed at March 31st, 2024, we needed to take in consideration all those transactions. Contingent liabilities is one example.
I'm not talking about the contingent liabilities.
And the non-permitted surplus, it's another example. For this one, we did not adjust the books. What we did, we've put a note to the financial statements for the reader to be informed of that transaction.
The contingent liabilities, when did they change? I guess when did they become assessed as likely to result in future payments? The triggering from it to become listed in the public accounts and therefore delaying the public accounts.
So again, if the situation existed...
No, I'm asking when.
So
when was it assessed to likely result in future payments?
We have a lot of contingent liabilities. We need to look at all of them individually.
Specifically the $16 billion for regarding the Indigenous.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not only one transaction. It is several transactions included in that amount. So we have to make a determination one by one in terms of the likelihood of a payout and if we're able to estimate an amount.
Mr. Forbes, in the public accounts, it states federal pollution pricing system is revenue neutral. We had this discussion last year. It's not revenue neutral. We've stated as such. Why is it listed as it is revenue neutral?
Thanks for the question. I mean, the government has committed to and is doing over time returning the money to... But
it's not revenue neutral. And actually, if you look
Mr.
at...
McCauley, that is your time, I'm afraid. Turning now to Mr. Erskine-Smith. Good to see you today, sir. And you have the floor, please.
Thanks very much. I do understand, Chair, the consideration where the late tabling of the documents. I do think fairly it would have been good to send us a note on Monday just so we were kept apprised of it, but I won't dwell on that. I want to start with actually where Mr. McCauley left off in terms of the contingent liabilities. So, so Canadians have a better understanding of what this actually means. We're talking about a fairly large number, $76 billion, but there's in this particular document it accounts for it looks like 16.5 or so new $1 billion in terms of contingent liabilities, and I'll read it. It says, as part of advancing its commitment to resolve past injustices by accelerating the resolution of Indigenous claims, the government recorded expenses of $17.8 billion in 2024, of which $16.4 billion is related to these contingent liabilities. So can you just spend a little time articulating a little bit more concretely, I guess, what that means?
So I will start with the definition of contingent liabilities, and after that, I will provide some examples. So contingent liabilities are possible obligations that may result in future sacrifice of economic benefits arising from existing conditions or situations involving uncertainty. And the uncertainty will ultimately be resolved one or more future events not only within the government's control occur or fails to occur. So contingent liabilities are distinct from liabilities that there is a degree of uncertainty as to whether a present obligation to sacrifice economic benefit exists at the financial statement date, March 31st, 2024. So there are two basic characteristics of a contingent liabilities. First one, there must be an existing condition or a situation like I was explaining earlier, and there must be an expected future event that will resolve the uncertainty as to whether a present obligation exists. For a contingent liability to be present, there must be an existing condition or situation at the financial statement date that indicates that the government may have a liability. And the existing conditions or situation could be, for example, a legal case.
But I don't want to entirely cut you off there, but it might be helpful to offer an example that is more accessible than reading some of the definitions you're reading there. So we'll give my constituents are saying that's a big number, $16.5 billion of new accounting here. What's an example?
Using a court example, if a court case is filed before the end of the fiscal year, so it's filed before March 31st, 2024, there may be a need to record a contingent liability for that court case when a payment is likely. And the assessment of likelihood is complex and may include such items as filing a new claim, certification of a class action claim by the court, the completion of a legal risk assessment by Justice Canada, new information regarding the class size or other factors that influence the potential value of a claim, and a decision by the government to enter into negotiations to settle out of court.
Right. So this isn't. I mean, you'll hear Conservatives cast this as, well, you're widely missing the mark here, and sort of suggesting it's profligate spending, certainly. But this is not new program spending. This is accounting for liabilities that pre-existed this government. Is that right?
So we have three types of contingent liabilities for Indigenous, and one of them is specific claims. And as you said, specific claims deal with past grievances of First Nation related to Canada's obligation under historic treaties. So at March 31st, we'll look at the conditions, and we'll look if we're able to assess the likelihood of a payout, if we're able to assess the amount that will go with that payout, and we have to make a determination if we need to take a contingent liabilities. In some cases, if we're not able to determine an amount, we'll put a note in the financial statements.
Right. I appreciate that. I want to switch gears a little bit because the other piece, this a smaller piece, is related to, I think it's $1.2 billion a write-down of expired COVID treatment and vaccines, and another $3.5 billion with respect to loans and receivables related to emergency supports. And this has been a bit of a politically contentious issue as well, where sort of there's been accusations that the CEBA program was mismanaged, and obviously the Auditor General has a report on this. And I do want to just, there's been some questions as to the value of the CEBA program and what purpose it served for small businesses. And Mr. Forbes, could you speak to, take us back to March 2020, and to the dire straits in the ensuing months that small businesses were facing. How necessary was the CEBA program for businesses to survive?
Sorry, thanks for the question. The CEBA program, I mean, we talked about this, I think, last week or the week before. We think it was part of a suite of programs that really helped support the Canadian economy through the really difficult parts of the pandemic, and maybe the evidence that I would look at would just be, some of the results for small businesses in terms of survival rates, low bankruptcy or insolvency rates, and this was kind of the key measure that was there to support small businesses.
And I want to imagine an alternate scenario here, where you've got a leader who says something like, I don't believe in big fat government programs, and I just want to cut taxes and red tape. And how would that have helped small businesses in the course of a pandemic?
Thanks for the question. I mean, I think absent the CEBA program, I don't have a counterfactual, but absent the CEBA program, we would have seen a much higher rate of small business insolvencies and probably bankruptcies during the pandemic. I mean, I think that's...
and absent the CERB, how many people would have struggled individually who have lost their employment?
Yeah, I don't have a number for you, but to say I think when we look at the suite of benefits that were provided, I think our assessment would be that those were necessary to protect Canadians at a time when the economy was largely shut down, when businesses, both in terms of the debts they owed and managing their borrowings and in terms of current activities, were severely impacted. And so... But
what if we just said, we're just going to cut your taxes?
That is your time, sir. I gave a little extra there because you were in a good exchange, but we will come back to that, I hope. Suivant.
Next up, we go to Ms. Sinclair-Desgagne remotely for 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here. I would also, of course, like to wish you a happy holidays season. So I'll directly start asking my questions. I have many questions. The first one will be for Ms. Boudreau. Now, if we look at the details of the public accounts, we see that the net debt hasn't really fluctuated that much because there's a big difference in terms of the assets coming from pensions. And if you look at the numbers between 2023 and 24, there's a difference of $7 billion. And in my riding only, Ms. Boudreau, I received within the span of a week 30 emails from civil servants who live in my riding and who are accusing the government of stealing their pension. And when you look at the numbers, you see that the government actually used some of the excess, the surplus there, and the government seems to have taken an amount that is far in excess of the amount that they have the right to manipulate. And you also mentioned this. This is one of the transactions that caused a bit of a delay in the filing of public accounts. And what is bizarre is that what caused a delay in public accounts presentation is the government who decided to go and use some of the money that is put into the system by civil servants, their contributions. So what can you please explain to us the $7 billion difference, or how much of that comes from the civil servant pension funds? Thank you very much for the question. When it comes to the $1.9 billion that I mentioned, the surplus, the non-allowed surplus, that has no impact on the consolidated public accounts of the government for March 31st, 2024. But there's a $7 billion difference when it comes to assets from the public sector pension plans, because that must explain the bulk of the difference. Well, I can get back to you with a written response, but what I can say at the moment is that the surplus, non-authorized surplus, has no impact, and people who are currently retired and who will be retiring soon will have no impact on their pensions in connection with the surplus. But that you cannot know, because you're never safe from a potential catastrophe in 5-10 years, and people who will be retiring in those time frames. Ms. Boudreau, you cannot say that. I mean, you don't have a crystal ball. You cannot really anticipate the fact that the pension system will not crumble, will not collapse. Because what level of protection does it have if you go and get money from this fund, the contributions from civil servants, public sector officials? Who made that decision, Ms. Boudreau? Well, it's a legal decision. But I asked who made the decision. Well, the president of the Treasury Board published a report, and the report was very clear. It was from the actuaries, and it said that the maximum allowable limit was 125%, and they had the legal obligation to let these funds exit the pension funds. Well, the labor union seems to be questioning the legality of using that much money, $1.9 billion in expenditure. So there's a press release from the labor union, and they seem to know what they're talking about, and that this amount is far in excess of what needs to be taken by the government. But you're saying the labor union doesn't know what they're talking about? Well, what I'm saying is that the amount was calculated by the chief actuary, and the $1.9 billion amount was what they ended up with, and this was put into the Treasury funds. So, in fact, civil servants, just in my riding, within a span of a week, I got 30 emails, and I'm assuming thousands and thousands others are being told untruths by their labor union. Well, I don't have the letter that you're referring to, so I cannot confirm its validity. I don't have access to it. Thank you. The Professional Institute of the Civil Service of Canada is against the government taking $1.9 billion from the pension funds, which was not authorized. So this amount represents the collective contributions of civil servants. And this letter, this press release rather, was sent by the labor union on November 29th, Ms. Boudreau. So this is all very bizarre. and the government should be working in closer connection with the labor union, because $1.9 billion taken from the pockets of the civil servants, it's an enormous amount. So I will need a written response on that to understand why there's a difference between 23 and 2024 of $7 billion in the assets from the pension funds of the civil sector, public sector. So my next question will be for Mr. Forbes. I asked the question to your officials actually on Monday during the lockup. I did not get many answers. I hope I'll have one today. For the $1.3 billion that was budgeted for the border, so this amount, where does this money come from, $1.3 billion? And the Department of Finance, has the department started to come up with a plan for these $1.3 billion for the control of the border? Well, to answer your question, yesterday there was an announcement by a number of ministers on a plan for the border, which provided some details for that amount of $1.3 billion. I do not have the text itself with me, but it contained some details for that plan for the border. Thank you very much. Up next.
Cannings, joining us virtually as well. You have the floor, sir, for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to start off by kind of picking up where Madame Sinclair-Desgagne was going with the pension fund situation. I think all MPs across the country have heard a lot of concern from public servants who are putting deferred pay basically into their pension fund, and now they find that they've been paying so much that it's created a surplus that has gone above the legal amount, and so now that part of that surplus has gone into general revenue. And as you know, these pension funds come from a contribution by both the workers and the government. And I think the workers and pensioners are upset that they don't seem to be getting, if they've been paying too much, they're not getting that money back directly to themselves or through other mechanisms. It's just going into general revenue. They don't mind the government portion going back, I'm sure. But I'm just wondering, is there any mechanism to do that? Is there any plans? And if there isn't, why isn't there? Because it seems to be patently unfair, and that's why we are being swamped with messages from our constituents.
Thank you for the question. When the surplus was in the document tabled by the President of Treasury Board, she mentioned that the government is looking at options for the future, and she will be discussing that with stakeholders. So I don't have more information at this moment when it will be discussed and with which stakeholders will be involved. So there's nothing else I can offer, I can tell you today on this one.
And those options would refer to what to do with the extra money, or options to make sure we don't have such an incredible surplus in the future? This all started, I believe, back in the Harper administration. They changed the structure of the pension fund, so new employees were getting a different kind of pension so that they would have to work longer to get it, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems that there has to be some rejigging there as well for the future, as well as what to do for the present. Do you provide any advice to the government on those options?
Like I was saying, the President is required to do something when there is a surplus above 125%. And this is what she did. She tabled a document that was supported by the actuary that showed the non-permitted surplus situation. That amount will be transferred into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. And again, some discussions will happen in the new calendar year with key stakeholders, and she will be in a position to provide more information next year.
Okay, I'll move on to the statement in the public accounts that said that revenues increased by 11.7 billion. At the same time, income tax revenue decreased 0.7%, mainly due to lower corporate taxable income and income from non-residents. So if revenues from corporate taxes were down, who paid this extra $12 billion and how did they pay it?
Thanks for the...
Who picks up that difference?
Thanks for the question. I'm not sure it's a question of difference, but just to say that different revenues grow at different paces, and we have, other large sources of revenues. Personal income taxes grew, GST revenues. We have a number of other revenue sources that grew, and so those offset the effects of the corporate tax revenue decline, and that is sort of normal in any fiscal year, that different bases will grow at different paces, just depending on the state of the economy and other developments.
So do you have any sense of why corporate taxes went down?
Well, I think, as we said, the growth in corporate taxable income was one piece of it. For sure, I could turn to my colleague, Ms. Dancy, who may have other information, the specific details.
Oh, happy to add just a little. What we've described in the fall economic statement, Annex 1, there's a bit of a discussion about the current fiscal forecast. And, Deputy, as you've noted, there's a general slowdown in the economy, which has been facilitated to arrive at this soft landing, has resulted in just a lower corporate taxable income or profit stream than we previously had foreseen.
So can you just tell me what the total revenue from corporate taxes were in the last year? Anybody have that figure?
Sorry, $82.5 billion was the corporate tax revenue that's recorded in the public accounts.
And the amount for personal income taxes?
$218 billion. I think I've got the right number.
Okay, so, I think it's well known that, big corporations especially, and I'm not talking about small businesses here at all, have elaborate ways of going through loopholes to decrease their tax amount. It's been calculated that, we are losing $10 billion a year on these loopholes. Is that something that anybody here today would provide advice to the government on how to close those loopholes, how to, I don't think we want to put an extra burden on companies that are suffering and struggling. And obviously, if they are, they're not paying much tax because they're not making much money. But for the companies that are.
Mr. Forbes, I'm going to have, you're well over your time, but I'm going to have Mr. Forbes answer your question, and then we'll come back to you on this line. Mr. Forbes, you can answer that, please.
Thanks. Yeah, a couple of points. We work very closely with the Canada Revenue Agency to identify places where the tax system, where there is avoidance of taxes that should otherwise be paid. I think there's been a number of steps taken in the past few years to tackle some of this tax, this unfair tax avoidance, tighten rules. And, there's an ongoing effort, quite honestly, with the Canada Revenue Agency to identify these pieces, because I think the fairness of the tax system, it's important that corporations and individuals feel that, that the tax that is owed is being collected. So it's an ongoing battle, and we work closely with the Revenue Agency to tackle those issues.
Thank you very much. That ends our first round. Our second round will consist of 6 members with various times each. Miss Rempell Gardner, pardon me. We've known each other for so long. I apologize about that. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and allow me to put on the record that Teddy is a wonderful dog. I just feel like that should have gone in the Hansard, so I will continue. Mr. Forbes, have you developed an economic analysis of a potential 25% tariff on exports to the United States should the new American administration implement this measure in January?
Thanks for the question. We're certainly working on a range of scenarios in terms of what might happen. I mean, this is it's a statement, but obviously the new U.S. administration is not in place.
Can you table any interim results that you have on that with this committee?
I would have to see what I have available, but we have done some work in this area.
Okay, so it's approximately a month away, so that exercise has not been complete yet?
I would say it's, in some ways, it's evergreen, right? I mean, we're trying to figure out as we go exactly how this will impact us.
Have you forecasted how many jobs would be lost, or the impact on the labor market in Canada should a 25% tariff be implemented on January 20th from the American administration?
Thanks for that. Certainly, I would say there's two parts to that question. We don't have final numbers that I could share. We're working both with businesses and provinces and our own models to determine
So that
impacts.
has not been, we're a month away from that, and there is no plan or no economic analysis of that impact complete yet.
I would say there's economic analysis that's been done.
Who's holding the pen on that analysis right now?
Well, the main departments that would be involved would be Global Affairs, the Department of Finance.
But who's coordinating it?
It's a collaborative process.
Is there one person? Like, is there a project management office for this?
No, there's no project management office,
Okay.
but we have
So there's some people that are working on it off the corner of their desk? Would that be an accurate characterization?
Thanks for the question, but no, I wouldn't characterize it that way.
So who's in charge of that?
Well,
You?
officials report to the cabinet. There's a cabinet committee on Canada-U.S. relations, which is
So who's
chaired
on that cabinet committee right now?
Well, it's chaired by Minister LeBlanc. There is a number of other
Okay, so
ministers.
the fresh cabinet minister, as of yesterday, I got it. I think it's pretty clear that we don't have an analysis on that done. That's wild. I really hope you guys get on that for the sake of this country. Does your budgetary forecast for fiscal year 2024-2025 include additional spending to meet Canada's 2% NATO commitment?
Thanks for the question. The budget, the FES, the Fall Economic Statement, has the investment line from the defense policy review that took place and was announced in budget 2024.
I'm asking about the upcoming.
Yeah, I'll finish the answer. There are no additional amounts for the commitment to get to 2%.
Have you has the government directed your department to conduct an economic impact analysis of the government's proposed industrial emissions cap? Are
you speaking about the oil and gas
Correct.
cap? I think there's a cost-benefit analysis that would be included, a regulatory impact assessment that's done with all regulations that would have been submitted to the Treasury Board.
But there has been an economic impact analysis done. Can you table that with this committee as well?
That would be with the Treasury Board. I'll have to check as to what I could table. It's been submitted to Treasury Board, so it may be a cabinet confidence.
Last week, the parliamentary budget officer said the government's, I like to call it the GST tax trick, would cost as much as $2.7 billion if province with an HST asked for compensation. Has the government given your department any indication that they intend to compensate provinces who have not waived their compensation requirement?
We have put forward in the Fall Economic Statement the cost of the federal portion. The government has indicated that provinces that wished to join could do so by paying for themselves.
But there are some who have said that they would not waive the requirement. Have you forecasted a potential compensation or following through with your compensation requirement?
I'm unaware of which provinces.
Saskatchewan, for example.
Yes, Saskatchewan is not thanks for the question, but Saskatchewan's not a harmonized sales tax province, so they wouldn't.
Are there any other provinces who have said that they have not had their requirement waived?
Not to my knowledge, but I can't confirm that.
Was the cost of renting hotel rooms for refugees and asylum claimants what was the total cost of renting hotel rooms for refugees and asylum claimants in fiscal year 2023-2024?
Thanks for the question. I don't have the answer for that. I would have to, maybe one of my TBS colleagues would have that.
Can you please table that with committee?
Of course.
How many refugees and asylum claimants were housed in hotel rooms in fiscal year 2023-2024?
We'll come back with an answer to the committee.
You will
in
table it
writing.
with the committee. What was the total cost of per diems for refugees and asylum claimants in fiscal year 2023-2024?
We'll come back to the committee with an answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is your time, Ms.
Thank you.
Rempell, Gardner. Suivant, c'est M. Drouin pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses who are here on short notice. You knew the meeting was happening on Monday. At least you had more time than us, but that's not your issue. It's an issue I have with the Chair.
To the Controller, just with regards to the tabling of public accounts, now normally I know that they should have been submitted 1 month before. You've raised large financial transactions as a potential excuse as to the reason, the rationale as to why we couldn't table the public accounts in time. But understanding that, how are you changing? Are you guys changing your internal processes to ensure that we do table public accounts in a timely fashion, and we do respect that October 15th date that we had set out from this committee that we had set out to respect? Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. And I would like to say that I started that position on April 15, 2024. And year-end was March 31st, 2024. So I was not there for the fiscal year that we just tabled. Mm-hmm. So obviously I needed time to look at those transactions and make sure that I was comfortable with them. Having said that, as you said, the commitment made by the former CG was to table by October 15, 2025. So we still have that commitment. And yes, we are looking across the departments and the Crown corporations that are included in the public accounts to make sure that we have proper controls, proper mechanism, and also that we are able to speed the process this year. As the auditor mentioned, she has a commentary in this year in terms of my office having a stronger role in terms of working with CFOs as well as deputy heads, and that's our commitment that we have. We do accept that observation, and we'll make sure that next year we are in a better position to table earlier.
Merci beaucoup pour votre réponse, Monsieur.
Thank you very much for your answer. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a motion. It's very quick. I hope the committee will be able to deal with it quickly, and then we'll be able to get back to the questions. Now, you can maybe see this coming because we seem to be having issues getting information, so I seem to need to put guardrails around your chairmanship, Mr. Chair. So that's only because we want to get to do information in line, with the exception of a meeting called for 104.6, that no member of the committee will be called into a meeting during the holiday break period. So it's very short, the motion, but this is just to put guardrails, if you will, around your position as the chair, because I cannot keep working like this.
This motion is out of order. We're here to hear from witnesses today, Mr. Drouin. This is not time for committee business, so I'm ruling your motion out of order. And I will...
Chair, I challenge your ruling.
Ms. Khalid, you say it's point of order,
Point of order.
And then you get the floor.
I challenge your ruling.
The ruling is being challenged, and we will hear from members if we wish to continue hearing from witnesses, or if we wish to turn to debate this matter about working in January.
Shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Monsieur Drouin. No. Mr. Erskine-Smith.
No.
Madame Khalid.
No.
Mr. Scarpaleggia.
No.
Ms. Yip.
No.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Ms. Rempell Garner.
That's fine. Yes. You're fine.
Madame Sinclair-Desgagne.
Oui.
Mr. Cannings?
No.
6 yeas, 4 nays.
Very good. I'm just going to suspend the meeting. I'll check with Mr. Drouin. Have you sent the motion to the clerk yet? I'll come back to you just a few minutes, please.